Hey everybody, and welcome back to the best areas in Dark Souls. Last time we covered the first 13 areas in our worst to best community ranking, so be sure to check out part 1 for some serious stinkers if you haven't already. I've left another link to the Dark Souls 2 area survey at the top of the video description, so be sure to check it out and vote. And with that, let's dive right in with our number 10 area. Yet another area that seems to suffer from some sort of indifference when you consider near bottom votes for worst area and right around the middle for best. It received a pretty high score nonetheless, and I would wager it largely has to do with the aesthetics of the area and the bosses within. Both Calamite and Artorias are some of the best bosses in the series, and although the area is to a certain extent a reskin of the Darkroot Garden, the difference in color palette and enemies makes all the difference. Though personally, I often find myself rushing through this area similar to Tomb of the Giants. Not because I hate it, but more so because I'm so excited to get to the Artorias boss fight, I just want to skip straight to it. So I guess that's how I remember the Royal Woods, a pretty introduction into some of the series' best bosses. Speaking of areas that are being ranked for their aesthetics, I can't think of a single reason Ashlake makes the top 10 other than it being a gorgeous locale. On one hand, it received top 5 in voting for the best area in the series, but it actually managed to just crack in the top 10 for worst area. I have to imagine the worst voting comes from those who feel this area is unfairly revered as a top-notch area in the game, when in reality it's got barely anything to it. A Hydra, a few clams, and a tree with a dragon covenant. Whoopee! Personally, I can't argue that the design is beautiful, but I have to agree that this area lacks substance, and for that reason I'd normally say it doesn't have any business being this high on the list. But honestly, when it comes down to ranking things, what sticks out to us often boils down to what's memorable. And there's no denying that the first time you step foot in Ash Lake is a hard moment to forget. Chasm of the Abyss. More like Chasm of the Abitch! I mean, yeah, I love this area, woo! Alright, I'm gonna be frank. This area doesn't differ a whole lot in comparison to an area like Tomb of the Giants for me. And I'll give you one guess as to why. You got it? You ready? It's dark. Yep, surprise, motherfucker. I hate dark areas in this game. And despite the fact that it's easy to traverse your way straight to Manus once you know the path, doesn't change the fact that this area is dark and ganky. To give it due credit, the area is designed much better than Tomb of the Giants overall, and seeing all those humanity husks is haunting and even disturbing in a weird way. Then there's the fact that entering into the depths of the abyss has huge lore implications, and we've got another juggernaut of a great boss at the bottom. But still, I can't help but feel slightly perturbed every time I'm forced into the dark depths of the Abitch. And so we come to the BURG, the first main entry level after the tutorial of the Undead Asylum. I'm sure that many players have fond memories of this area because it's the first place you're introduced to the real dangers of Dark Souls. There's hollows ready to gank you, archers ready to hassle you, black knights to massacre you if you take a step into the wrong neighborhood, and even a quick introduction to the Slam Jam if you chose the Master Key. Add in the fact that this is a massive PvP hotspot for the game, and you've got all the makings of a great area. So why does it only come in at number 7 on the list? Well, I wouldn't necessarily say that there's anything wrong with the area, just that the remaining areas on our list have a bit more of a wow factor. Nonetheless, every one of us will remember our first grueling experience through the trials of the BURG. I can't decide whether I'm surprised to see SEN'S Fortress not crack the top 5, or rather if I'm not shocked one bit. Just like Ash Lake, it broke top 5 in votes for best area and top 10 voting for worst area. This is representative of the idea that while SEN'S Fortress is brilliant in terms of being a trap-filled funhouse of death, this brilliance in being so effective at its purpose also makes it downright fucking frustrating to go through. While there's really so much hatred for Blighttown, the area that precedes it is where the difficulty in Dark Souls really ramps up. Not only are the enemies a lot tougher, but the map itself is out to get you. As with Blighttown, I feel this area fits perfectly within the idea of punishing difficulty and challenge, and that's quite rewarding. At the same time, when a player dies again and again and again, it'll naturally lead to a sort of frustration that is ultimately directed at the level itself. So let's say that while we can appreciate SEN'S Fortress for what it is, that doesn't mean it isn't a love-hate relationship. The final DLC area on our list fits just inside the top 5. First, I think this area is largely remembered more for being a PvP area than actually a quality area itself. That's not to say it isn't a quality area, I just think it's actually somewhere in the middle of the pack from a PvE perspective. Most of this opinion of mine stems from my disdain for the enemies of the area. These lanky arm bastards are a minor hassle to deal with at best and are downright annoying at worst. There's the magic variant, which is even more annoying, and this is all ignoring the fact that this is essentially a brighter new Londo ruins to me. It's a bunch bunch of bridges, buildings, etc. strung all together over a precarious depth. You know, maybe I just get lost a lot in this series. Whatever, either way I believe this area is remembered fondly for its PvP and maybe a little bit less so for its average PvE. And so the hub area finally finds a spot on our list. I think there was no doubt it was going to crack the top 5, but I couldn't say exactly where it would be placed. A lot of what I applied to the Nexus and the Demon Souls area rankings applies here. There's a sense of comfort in returning to a home of sorts, and it's nice collecting a bunch of NPCs there to greet you, but there is a marked difference between the two. Whereas the Nexus serves as a literal hub that connects directly to any other area in the game via the Archstones, Firelink Shrine is more like the core of Lordran. It's the place the player starts to connect a series of branching paths leading to all of the areas on our list. It's undoubtedly one of the factors of Dark Souls that is most celebrated. The interconnectivity in this game was astonishing when it released and still is to this day. That all starts with our home in Firelink Shrine. It's poetic in a way that we go from talking about the home where our journey begins to discussing the area where the adventure ends. For starters, the Kiln of the First Flame in my opinion is the most gorgeous area in the entire game, even beating out Ash Lake. After taking down the Lords to gain access to the land where the First Flame rests, you've had so much energy put into getting to this very moment. Traveling down those steps with the ethereal knights passing by is very mysterious, and then you enter the area and the scale of the beauty made me take a deep breath in awe the first time I saw it. Only a collection of black knights remain to stop you from reaching the husk of the once mighty Lord of Sunlight Gwyn and ultimately the First Flame. I do always say the journey is just as important as its conclusion, but when a conclusion is done as well as it is in Dark Souls, it gives great reflection upon everything that got you there. The Kiln of the First Flame sets the perfect stage to do just this. And when we agree so heartily, there comes a time where we have to disagree. I went into this knowing there was likely a chance we'd be seeing the Painted World in the top 3, but perhaps I was hoping for some sort of anomaly that would prevent me from having to ream into what I know as the Painted World of Hiatus. Okay, I'm kidding, it's not that bad. Really, it's not even a little bad. I just don't think I've ever quite understood why this area is celebrated so heavily by fans of the series. Maybe it's that we often favor snowy areas in these games, reindeer fuckland withstanding, or maybe it's Priscilla being a fan favorite character that I forgot on the waifu list, but I don't know, I just don't find it to be that memorable. I'm trying to figure out exactly why and I'm having trouble. I mean, I'm not a fan of the hollow enemies. They're not unique and the Blood Plus ones are gross. In fact, most of the enemies here are annoying, but that's true for so many areas across the entire series. I do think the aesthetic of the area is pleasant and the Phalanx Knot is pretty awesome. Maybe it's just how disappointing Priscilla is as a boss. I talked about it in my boss ranking series, but the idea of a boss that goes invisible and you have to track via footsteps is a really neat concept, but I don't feel like it's executed horribly well, with her being a damage sponge you can annihilate with little actual danger. The reason this is relevant in an area ranking is that after playing these games so many times, I've realized that for me, I've kinda grown tired of the areas to some extent. The minute dangers of the game pale in comparison to the rush of a boss fight, so I often want to get through the areas as fast as possible so I can get the high of fighting a more worthy foe. But in this area, the foe you face at the end isn't very worthy at all, and that's a true shame because it could have been so much more. In the end though, it doesn't really matter. Even if I couldn't enjoy this area much, I'm genuinely happy that most fans of the series could so lovingly. There may have been a Blighttown upset in these rankings, but I didn't doubt for a second that Anor Londo would be topping our list. It may have garnered average votes for worst area, likely due to people resisting the greatness, but it's hard to deny when it received nearly half of all voting for best area. Using my weighted scoring system with positive bonus points for best area and negative bonus points for the worst area, the actual Anor Londo score is 10.64, making it unquestionably the best in terms of fan voting. But what is it exactly that makes Anor Londo the best area and what many likely consider to be the best game in the series? Firstly, the aesthetic of the area is amazing, making it feel like you're storming a prestigious castle by sunset. Then there's the enemies, none of which I find to be particularly bad. In fact, I'd say most are pretty awesome, and that's coming from someone who tends to find the enemies in the series pretty meh. One of the best parts is getting to fight all the Black Knights as normal enemies. Of course, there's the Anor Londo archers to be mentioned, and while I think they could easily be argued as unfair, I love the challenge that they present. It's almost as if the game wants to give you one final tough trial before you make it to what I believe is the height of the game. Everything Everything has been building up to this moment. The moment when you finally fight the legendary duo and get access to the holy pair that puts the second, arguably weaker half of the game in motion. I could go on, but when it comes down to it, Anor Londo is the peak of Dark Souls for me, and perhaps even the peak of the entire series. We probably all have somewhat different reasons for why we feel this way, so be sure to sound off in the comments with your own reasoning. I want to thank you all for joining me for the best areas in Dark Souls. Next up, we're going to be tackling the areas of Dark Souls 2, so be sure to check out the survey in the video description to get your votes in on that. Follow me on Twitter for all the latest video updates, and if you're watching this video as it went live, then I'm going to be live on Twitch finishing up my Soul Level 1 run of Dark Souls as we speak. I have Gwyn in the DLC left, so there's still 5 tough bosses for me to topple. Come check me out over there if you've got the time, and as always, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.